Ooh. What's up, all you fancy pants viewers on the internet? Mark with Carterbox Academy here, and I'm back making videos. So I am, for any of you who aren't aware, our son, my wife and I, our son was born on the 27th. As of the filming of this video, it's October 3rd. It's our first kid. He's a newborn. His name is Evan. He's wonderful. We love him. I'm not sleeping. Anyone out there with kids is looking at me and saying, "Ha, enjoy it, punk." They're laughing at the suffering we're going through right now. It's not that bad. But you know, he was born. We took some time off. I took some time away just to focus on the new little babe, and also help my wife out. He'll make an appearance in a video at some point, but he's sleeping right now, and listen, I'm not undoing that. That I am not. After he falls asleep, I'm keeping him asleep, unless it's time to eat. Then he's got to wake up. But thank you all for your patience while we kind of had a little bit of a lull there. I'm back and at it, and I'm excited to be doing so. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name again is Mark, and I am a metal vocalist myself. I'm in a band called Kardashev. I've been doing metal vocals for like 14-ish years, give or take. I don't actually remember when I started, but it was around 13, 14 years ago. I'm in a band called Kardashev. We're on Metal Blade. We released an album recently. Check it out if you want. And I'm also a vocal coach, and I specifically teach people how to do all sorts of metal noises, fry, false chord, all sorts of cool stuff, so they can make all these, types of sounds safely and efficiently for years to come. And as part of the channel, we let our patrons nominate and vote on one video a month. We actually did two. This last one, we were just feeling a little froggy. I don't know why. We just did. So we're going to have two. This is the first of the two. And our patrons picked Within Destruction Nightmare. And I'm excited to do it because I haven't really listened to a lot of Within Destruction. So I remember their basic sound. But I'm excited to check it out. I'm expecting a little bit different from the deathcore fare that we kind of stick to sometimes. So this will be a nice break. And I think that's about it. If you're interested in nominating and voting on songs, check us out on Patreon. That gives you exclusive access. Well, not exclusive because it's you and all the other patrons, but that gives you access to our Discord server, where we have listening parties. We have karaoke days on certain Sundays, and it's a lot of fun. So last thing is, there may be moments where my brain just sort of stops working because I'm pretty tired. I'm pretty tired. So bear with me in this video. Give me some grace. Give me some grace. But beyond that, let's go ahead. Let's just jump into it. Let's do this. Let's check out Within Destruction Nightmare, voted on by our patrons. Here we go. All right, that actually was a pretty good intro. That wasn't bad at all. Perfect. They gave me a little break. Also, this, like, I don't know what genre to call it, but like the little drum and bass sound. Interesting. Didn't expect that very much. Like I said, maybe that's a Within Destruction staple, but it's rather new to me. We'll see where it goes. Okay, so I want to talk about the vocalist because that's what we do here. One thing that's really cool and really fascinating is that he's using a very like standard low roaring position, right? Now, when I talk about positions, what I want to make clear is that I'm talking about vocal tract shape, right? I'm talking about the shape of our vocal tract, where our lips are, where our tongue is, where our soft palate is. And it can be difficult to talk about vocal tract shape because you can't really like see it, unless you've got someone in an MRI or, you're scoping them and you can see just like the vocal cords like they did with Will Ramos a little while ago on the Charismatic Voice. So we have to kind of make our vocal tract shape and describe it by sound, right? So he's like, if I was to take his voice, the baseline resonant positioning of his voice here and put my clean voice through it, it would be this. Oh, Right. Now, one thing to be aware of is because all of our heads and vocal tracks are different shapes, give with not with so much variation that like it's crazy, but enough to make it noticeable. You may be in a slightly different position from me or from him to get that sort of resonance down. But essentially what we're doing is we're dropping our jaw. I'm curling my lips in slightly. And I'm curling my tongue up and back. I'm not making contact with the roof of my mouth or with the little bumpy spot behind my top teeth. It's called the alveolar ridge. I'm not making any connections there. My tongue is free floating through the cache, streaming code in binary. Tell me if you get the reference below. But my tongue is free floating here. Right? And that gives us a really big boomy sound. Now, it can be tempting to pull your larynx down when you do this to give it some extra oomph. You don't need to. If your larynx naturally goes down a little bit, that's okay. But if we take this and we put some like just some simple grunts through there, and you can hear how much of a difference it makes is if I stop doing that, right? So I'm here. See, the sound becomes a lot more thin, right? So this is a really good, and it's a fundamental sound. Like a lot of the time when my students are like, I want to get my lows lower, but I don't know how. This is where we start, and then we build from here. But taking our voice, curling the tongue, lips in, that makes a big difference. Dropping the jaw is huge as well. Don't drop your jaw so far the joints are uncomfortable. Your jaw should really hang. And if as part of your warm-ups, you're relaxing your jaw, you're relaxing these big muscles here. And then the jaw just hang. You'll get enough opening. I was about to go off on a tangent. That's not important at all. But also with his voice, I'm going to push play here again in a little bit. Don't you worry. But also with his voice, I'm hearing a very heavy amount of false chord sound going on here. I remember he did a Whitechapel thing. I actually watched it in anticipation for this a couple days ago. And there was a lot of Fry influence going on in there. That's fine. A lot of times vocalists are actually kind of mixing small elements of certain sounds. But to me, like if I had to pick one camp to put this in, it's very heavily false chord influence. So we'll talk more about that in a second. But let's go back so I can hear this transition. Let's talk a little bit more. Let's pause right there because there's a lot that just happened. I'm going to say something kind of controversial. I don't know if it's controversial. Maybe it's not. But I think some people might disagree with me here, and that'll be interesting to me. But his mids to me have a little bit of an Alex Terrible sound. I don't know who was on the scene first. I think Within Destruction predates Slaughter to Prevail. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I hear some similarities there, which is really interesting. So there were a couple things that were really cool. He's doing in this one section when he's like laying in the coffin, right? He's doing some sort of narration and he slowly builds into the scream. I love when vocalists do this in songs because number one, I think it sounds cool. I just think it sounds neat. I enjoy it. And number two, it kind of shows us how they build their scream. Now, it's not always going to be an exact representation of what their scream actually is because, while it is true, I do this in a lot of videos, we can take a scream and we can like slowly pull the volume back to see what it's built on. It is also true that, just because A leads to B doesn't mean that, it's always going to follow that path, right? I'm having trouble describing it, but like people can turn, like someone can take a false chord scream and slowly reduce it to a Fry scream and if we're not aware of that, we could kind of get ourselves a little off track trying to figure out what's going on with their scream. But I think here it's a pretty safe bet that this is a solid build, right? He's starting from the ground floor, which is like talking like this, which is definitely a false chord voice right here like this, and then building into it right there. And then he takes this switch, and he gets the sound kind of like that, right? Very cool, very interesting, and I liked that a lot. Now, he with his, and this is where things can vary from person to person, and I really enjoy it. He has a certain level of tightness, not a bad level of constriction, but a certain level of tightness to his scream. So if I take, you know, an old school foundational false chord noise, ma. You don't really hear that used a whole lot anymore these days. I mean, depending on the genre. But I can take that and I can add a little bit. This is kind of a dicey term amongst some people. But I can take it and I can sort of like restrict that airflow, or I can compress that airflow, and I can make it kind of a looser but still tighter sound. So I have this right. So that works there. I can also go a little bit of a different way and utilize a little bit of fry distortion mixed into that, right? And create a little bit of a tighter sound. That sounds like what's happening here. It sounds like what he was doing in that Whitechapel mono vocal cover submission. And that sounds a little bit more like, you hear the difference? And that's kind of what I hear going on here, because he's got such a clean and steady distortion. It doesn't have that sort of like, well, in a lot of his like roaring mids, it doesn't have that like iconic sort of like asymmetric rattly sound that we get a lot with a lot of false chord noise. It has a lot more of that like TV static sound going on, which sounds really cool. And I like how he builds into that. It's important to note that when we're talking about managing airflow with our screams and restricting that airflow slightly, it does not mean that just you take your vocal muscles, squeeze down on them, and boom, there you are. You have good tone. It's actually something that you have to work for and train towards. It's not really a place that I start a lot of students. So if I was to describe to you like what these things felt like and what I'm doing, right? If I'm going the more false chord, right, influenced route. So, you know, here's like the basic false chord sound again. A-E-I-O-U, right? Kind of old school. What I'm doing on this side, and I've talked about this in a lot of videos, is I'm sort of like introducing a Kermit the Frog vocal positioning to that. So if I was to go A-E-I-O-U, when I'm over here, bringing in my like utilizing the arytenoid, if we're getting really specific, utilizing the arytenoid cartilage to get those cuneiform cartilages above the vocal folds to touch and rattle around, right? When I'm doing that, I don't feel my vocal folds being squeezed together, right? The glottis, the area where the vocal folds are, does not feel constricted. So when I'm doing this, I don't feel any pressure on my actual vocal folds, and it makes things pretty easy. And it sounds like this. So none of that sort of like Kermit sound. A-E-I. A little bit of that Kermit sound. It changes the sound, right? Now over here on this side, where I'm adding a little bit more of like a fry influence to it, you can hear how that's a little bit more gurgly. What it sounds like is, what it feels like is, this is not one of my favorite exercises. I really don't like starting fry students here, but it kind of sounds like that sort of like gut punch that you see sometimes. That's an old school exercise, but like that, like like it feels like that. However, instead of that distortion being on my vocal folds, which I don't want you to feel like that distortion is actually on your vocal folds, it feels like it's kind of up behind my tongue. And that's actually quite comfortable. It's just like below my tongue. And if I was, you know, I've actually never turned that into a speaking voice. Let's hear what that sounds like. Hey, man, what's going on, man? Hey, man, what's going on, man? Yeah. Yeah, so again, not a lot of constriction on the actual vocal folds, but the supraglottal, there is a little bit more. I'll be honest about that. The vocal folds are being sort of given a little bit more like medial tension. Not so much that it's uncomfortable, but most of what I feel engaging and rattling around is, again, those tissues above the vocal folds, those supraglottal tissues. And that's kind of like a similar thing, right? So it's kind of like the Kermit sound, right? But utilizing a different tool. And that's what I mean when I say that we can kind of mix and match and combine different distortion methods. Some people call them hybrid screams. And I want to make it clear there's not like one hybrid scream. You can mix things in a lot of different ways, and it can be as unique as all the different people's voices making these sounds. Anyways, I've been rambling. I want to talk about that gritty sort of like Chester Bennington-ish singing, but I've been talking a lot. So let's let the song play a little bit and we'll keep going. Okay, let's pause right there. So there's a lot of stuff we could talk about with the screaming, but let's talk about that singing. So there are a couple things that I want to point out here. So when we have this tone, right, essentially what this is this is just clean singing with some grit on it, right? A lot of people will be like, they'll be like, oh, that's fry singing. Oh, that's false chord singing. Oh, that's glottal compression singing. I have found through teaching that it's a lot easier for most students to not really worry what it's classified as and just to think about what it feels like. It's also important to note there are different types of gritty singing. Like, you know, this is gritty singing, no doubt. Sounds very Chester Bennington to me, right? But at the same time, we wouldn't say that this is the exact same gritty singing that we would hear in like a squall in gospel music, right? So it's important that we don't just take all of our gritty singing and sort of like smush it together. Now, for this gritty singing, what I usually do is, number one, if I'm going to teach a student to sing like this, I'm a little bit like, you know, I've had people sometimes not take lessons with me for this reason, but I'm pretty determined on this. I'm pretty set in my ways on this. If a student wants me to teach them to sing like this, I need them to, number one, be able to make any sort of scream comfortably and reliably. I don't really care if it's a false chord or fry scream, to be honest with you. Doesn't matter to me. Because we're just going to take, like, I'm going to take whatever they're doing and help them turn it into gritty singing, right? And number two, they need to be able to hold a tune, right? They don't have to be the best singer in the world, right? You know, but, you know, get a mic at a karaoke song, sing the song that you're most comfortable with. And if, you know, you're doing pretty well and people are like, hey, not bad, man, that's fine. That's great. Just have a decent singing voice. If they can't hold a tone, or if they can't sing on pitch, I'm probably not going to really entertain this a whole lot, because when we are moving from pitch to pitch, that shows muscle control. Because how do we change pitch? We change the length and the thickness of the vocal folds, right? So if you can't, you know, sing a C major scale, right? Which it's okay if you don't like have perfect pitch. It's all right if you need someone to hit like C3 or C4 to get you started, right? I mean, I don't have perfect pitch. I have to hit the key myself. But you know, if you can't, you know, sing along with that, or even like, you know, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Like, if you can't even do that, I was a little flat on life. It's like, I don't know if like starting here is like the best idea. Now, if you're at home and you're self-teaching and you're doing this, you know, just be safe. But that disclaimer aside, I would really start this a lot like just like a gritty hey. Like, you can think of yourself as a stereotypical like biker or like gritty voiced character in like a cartoon. Hey man, hey, what's going on, dude? Good to see you. Now, when I'm doing this voice, there are a couple things that are going on. Number one, again, this is a commonality. My vocal folds are not being squeezed together very much at all. There is a little bit more medial tension. So, you know, your vocal folds, if they're opening and closing this way, right, there's a touch more squeeze there, but not in any degree where like I would really be aware of it unless I was analyzing it, right? Unless I was like zeroing in on my own process here. And then that distortion, I'm building very much on a false chord sound because that's the majority of what I personally do. I mostly do false chord influence sounds because that's just my comfort zone and where I started, right? I'm feeling a lot of that false chord influence back behind the tongue. I don't feel it down here. Hey, man. I do feel residual resonance, right? So I feel like the sound waves moving down. But as far as the actual tissues slapping together and disturbing the airflow, which, is what distortion is, right? That's, I would say 90 to 95% here. And then I would just have them focus on a pitch. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be up, forward, and projected. I'm also holding my ribs out and I'm squeezing my abdominal muscles like I'm taking a dump, right? The Melissa Cross dump. Many of us know what I'm talking about, right? Especially if you're around my age. People in their like mid 30s, give or take, because we had the Zen of Screaming and that was about it, right? That's what it was, right? And so I've got my ribs open. I'm doing this nice squeeze. Hey. And with my clean voice, I'm focusing on feeling that resonance up kind of behind my nose. I'm not super nasal, right? But I've got this this vibration building up behind my cheekbones, and I don't feel it fatiguing my throat at all. Hey, right? Now, another thing I'm doing is I'm giving myself, well, when I actually go for the distortion, I'm going to give myself a little bit of an excess of twang, right? More twang than you would actually want to sing with, right? More twang than you would want to sing with. But twang to a very strong degree. So like, that, hey, hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Hello, my ragtime gal. La da 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 da. Right. A lot of that. Now, this is happening mostly from the positioning of my tongue. When we have twang, there is a change in our laryngeal position, right? That's like changing the shape of that laryngeal funnel. But again, I don't feel like I'm squeezing a lot here. And one really easy way to do this, depending on what ducks say in your language, is to mimic a duck, right? Like quack, 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 yeah. Right? So I'm here, hey. I give it a little bit of that, like, stereotypical gruff cartoon character voice. Hey, this is my darkest nightmare. And we're approximating, right? We're getting to the place where now we have some gritty singing going on, right? You got to work with it. You got to perfect it to make it sound good and not like Mr. Krabs. But that's just like a basic rundown of how I would approach it. Let's keep going. Ooh. Nice. Not bad. As I feel like I've mentioned this in a lot of videos recently, but this is just something I'm noticing about myself. I'm starting to really enjoy vocalists who kind of like, I'm not using this term quite correctly, but like sit in the pocket, like they sit in their comfort zone and they add a lot of nuance there. Very cool. So yeah, that comfort zone for him is, but you can hear him kind of open up and widen his mouth. So we can make our mouth like tall or wide, right? And he kind of plays around with those positionings, and it's really cool. It sounds good. Yeah, overall, pretty cool song. That mixture of like that, like sort of synthy electronic sound and metal. It's not always my thing, but I think they did a pretty good job here. It sometimes when metal bands try to mix genres, it just kind of feels like they're putting pieces side by side versus interweaving them, to create a cohesive whole. It's kind of like, here's an example. It's kind of like pouring pasta sauce over your noodles, or cooking your noodles a little bit and then finishing cooking them in the pasta sauce, right? So that we get a flavor that carries throughout the whole dish for my pasta people out there. Anyways, good song. Good pick from my patrons. We have another one. I won't say what it is. I'll keep it exciting. But yeah, excellent vocals. Focus on, if you're brand new to vocals, focus on just getting a false chord or a fry sound down first. Just focus on comfort and control. Really focus on this interplay between breath support, resonance, and phonation, right? The way we utilize our airflow, the way our voice, so breath support, obviously, the sound that we're actually making, phonation, so it can be a clean sound or a distorted, dirty sound, and then where that sound is going and how it behaves in those spaces. Those three things together, if you just focus on those ingredients, then that will help you out. If you liked the video, we're keeping that in. If you liked the video, share, subscribe, all that stuff we're required to say as YouTubers. If you're interested in learning how to make some gurgly sounds, you can check us out using we have a website now. You don't have to do it just via email. I mean, you fill out a form that still comes to our inbox, but it's shiny. It looks better. So if you want to do that, check us out at cartervoxacademy.com, where you can learn a little bit more about lessons. And if you just want to hang and talk vocals and vote and nominate, check us out on Patreon. It's a lot of fun. With the new baby, I'm trying to, well, this is just recently, I'm trying to make as many events as I can. I'm still going to show my face. Maybe a little bit more intermittent, but I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for this vote, our dear patrons. And with that being said, many thanks, much love. I'm out.